Communications technology is a difficult conversation for anybody, let alone a church. And so I want this session to be an introduction, a bit of a laying the groundwork for conversation about communications, about social media, about websites, about video content, so that you as a church can start to think about where you might need to be. There's a very good chance you're already having these conversations, and so I might be saying some things that you already know, and that's fine. Just skip right over that, but there might be a nugget or two of information that you can pull from this. Hi friends, my name is Greg Simpson. I'm the minister at St. Andrew's United Church in Chatham, Ontario, and I have not always been a minister. I actually worked in the technology industry for 20 years before I went into ministry, and so I have slightly more background in tech than some ministry leaders, and there's some ministers and leaders of church. Now, because it has been a few years since I was very actively involved in the tech industry, there are definitely parts of the communications world that have moved on without me. And that actually helps, because that means I'm not going to get too down in the weeds with all of the deep tech conversation, but we're going to have a bit of a conversation today about communications, about the digital landscape that we find ourselves in today, and hopefully we can step a little bravely into where churches could see ourselves in the future. So I've got basically three things that I want to talk about. We're going to start with websites. That's pretty obvious, and you probably already are talking about this a little bit, or maybe deeply. And so I might give you a few things to think about while you're doing your website work. Secondly, we're going to talk about social media. Some of you have just gasped and clutched at your chest because it's a bit of a scary world if you don't know much about it. And thirdly, we're going to talk about video. Now, if I had shot this video 2 years ago, pre-pandemic, I might have actually left video out because there were lots of churches that could very well have survived without it. But once again, our world has changed and video is now necessary. And many of you have already bravely stepped deep into technology you didn't know anything about, and I commend you for that. Congratulations. We're going to touch on this a little bit and talk about maybe where you need to continue to show up in video, what steps might help you there. So those are the three pieces. Buckle in. We're going to jump into a bunch of communications and technology. The first is your website. And I'm going to start by telling you what I say to any church that asks me about communications. Your website, unfortunately, is not just a digital billboard or a digital newsletter. A website has to be a living, breathing thing. It has to be something that gets updated on a regular basis, that feels fresh, that includes up-to-date information. And when I say up-to-date, if you could update it once a month, that would be fantastic. Once a week, even better. And you're already thinking about what the time commitments are to make those things happen, and you are absolutely right. I'm not telling you this is an easy conversation, but it's definitely one that we need to have. And the reasons for these are pretty strong. And actually, I want to step away from websites just for a minute and talk about the church buildings that you might be part of or you might worship in, because we can talk about the building and use that as a way to envision what the website says about us as well. Imagine for a second that I am a visitor to your church building. I got invited here by a friend of mine, and I've just walked through the doors. And as I'm walking up, I'm looking at the landscaping. I'm looking at how the kind of upkeep of the building itself. I might actually take a look at the sign as I walk in, and it might say who the minister is. And as I'm coming into the building, I'm probably going to be paying attention to the sorts of things that are on the walls and in the sanctuary. I'm going to just take in what the look and feel is. Now think for a minute about your church, about your building, and what you find there. Is there maybe a picture of a bake sale from 1994? Is there a tapestry or a quilt that somebody made in the late 70s that a group of women got together, and it might even have names of some of the foundational people in your church who were so critical, and if without those people your church would not exist today? Or maybe somewhere there's a picture on the wall of when they were laying the cornerstone of the building. It's probably in black and white, and we all know that those people are long since gone, but without them we wouldn't be here. That is an important part of who you are as a church. And those things are beautiful parts of your history. But if I'm looking around the building and I don't see anything that is any newer than 4 decades old, I might wonder if you're going to be relevant. I might wonder if you know how to speak to me. I mean, I've only been on this planet for a bit more than those 4 decades. So now we talk about your website. There's a good chance that you already have a website. You probably had a volunteer or you paid somebody to make it, and maybe that was 8 years ago. And it was probably lovely and had some wonderful pictures then, but you don't have the time or the money or the effort to keep it maintained. So now let's think about the visitor who finds out about you from a friend. I've been invited to come to your church. I've been told that your minister shares amazing messages, and I really should come and just sit and be present and listen to what she has to say. Thank goodness for the person who invited me. But one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to get on my phone and I'm going to check your website. First off, does it even work on my phone? Because not all websites do. If we look at stats digitally, somewhere between 60 and 80% of all web traffic is on a device of some sort, a phone, a tablet, something like that. And websites that look great on your laptop don't always look good on your phone, especially if it was made 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, because the phone technology was nowhere near then what it is today. So that's one of the reasons that your site needs to be updated. It needs to look good on a device, and it needs to be content that's relatively fresh and relatively new. Now, here's actually a piece of hope that I can share with you. As a church, you are creative people. You might not know that, you might not think that, but you as a church are always creating. You are doing mission, you are doing work, you are creating new things in your communities. And the good news is all you got to do is talk about it. In fact, there's a good chance you're already talking about it because somebody is coming up with what gets said on the announcements. If they were to write that down, that could be something that could go onto the website. Your minister is creating something every single week or maybe every other week if that's when you meet. There is a message, even if they were to boil some of that down, or maybe you've got somebody who listens to the recording of that and can take a piece of that message and share something. There is a lot of content that is already going on in your church, that's already being created, that it takes just 1 or 2 extra steps to make sure that gets to the website. Now, of course, then there's the technology of how it gets to the website. And there's a chance that your website was built long enough ago that it doesn't exist on a content management platform. Now, you might not even know what I mean by that. A content management system, or a CMS, is a tool that makes it easy, or relatively easy, for somebody to be able to update a website without having to know all of the languages and technology that creates websites behind the scenes. It allows you to go in with maybe your browser and just type a few words or copy and paste from an email, stick in an image, play with the colors and the layout, and make it available to the whole world. There are many inexpensive and some free content management systems out there. If you're talking about free, there's a tool called WordPress that many churches use. If you wanted to look at things that are a little bit more expensive but still very accessible, the church here, St. Andrews, uses a content management platform called Wix, W-I-X. There's another one called Squarespace. I'm not specifically advertising for any of these. These are ones that I have personal experience with. But in all reality, I also have enough experience that I can sit down and write a web page from scratch. But I don't, because if I do that, it means I'm the only one who can update it, which means I've now kind of scuppered the whole system that makes it easy for a volunteer to come and help, or maybe a paid staff. But as a church, you need to know how to get content onto your website. Now that seems scary, but maybe doable. And the good news is, if you can find a way to create the structures and the process and the policies so that you can take the things that you're already creating and get them out to the outside world, then it's actually not that much harder to share that on social media. Now, many of you probably have a Facebook account. You might not use it very often, you might not post to it, but you've certainly heard of it. And you've heard of Instagram, you've probably heard of Twitter. There are many others. And I'm not going to presume to tell you where you need to be. But I do know that if you don't show up on some of those platforms, there are people out there who have never heard of you, and as far as they're concerned, you're invisible. Now, that seems like a harsh thing to say because you've got this big, gorgeous building, and if they can't show up at the building, then maybe you don't want them in your church. Well, that might be the case. But then I ask you, who are you accidentally or intentionally excluding from the future of your ministry? That's what happens when we aren't available, aren't visible online. If I were to pick one platform, I would say take a look at Facebook. It is comparatively easy to understand. There are also many, many people who already know how to use it. You've got people in your congregation who post to Facebook on a regular basis. Some of them use it to run their small business through. This is a space where you can show up and you can start to share content. You can be visible. If you've got some people who take a lot of photos, then maybe Instagram is a better spot to be. That's definitely a space where people can who can share more visual things, photos, short videos. Instagram is amazing for that. It's not nearly as good for sharing written content. And then you've got things like TikTok, and I'll admit that I don't know it very well. My kids are much more conversant in TikTok than I am, but there are a lot of other spaces, and TikTok is a way of sharing very, very short videos. And I know some ministries that are doing beautiful work and connecting with young people by sharing content on TikTok. You need to spend some time to think about which of those tools might make sense for you. And now the third thing is video. Probably somewhere around March of 2020, you realized that if you didn't have a way to show up on video, you were not going to show up for anybody in your existing congregation. And I want to thank you for the hurdles you jumped over, the hoops you had to jump through, all of the steps, all of the learning, all the things you had to do to get there. And I know you did in your own beautiful and creative and wonderful ways. Perhaps you started meeting with your small congregation by a phone first because you all knew you could make that work. And your prayer ministry and your calling ministry took off and did some beautiful things. And then maybe you took a step towards meeting via Zoom. Or maybe you did some live streams on Facebook or YouTube or some other live streaming platform. There are many things you did, and a lot of you started with just whatever you had in front of you. Maybe the little teeny camera on your laptop, or some of you just used the camera in your phone and started to connect that way. And a lot of you knew that you were way out of your element, but you bravely stepped into it. Thank you for that. And as time progressed, you got a little more comfortable with it, and maybe you spent a little bit to get a slightly better tool, or maybe you spent some money to learn a little bit more for yourself, or maybe as a church you invested in some technology. And thank you for that. But going forward, video is one of the most important ways that you can share what you do with the world. The great part, again, is you're already creating the content. Your minister shares, maybe in the sanctuary, maybe from home, they share video content just about every Sunday. And you as people, you know people who have cameras in their phones, and they're enjoying this idea of turning the camera on themselves or others more frequently. And so for video, I would say that YouTube is one of the most common sharing platforms. It has its ups and downs, but it is also a huge platform, and very, very many people are there. Facebook has a pretty decent video sharing mechanism as well, but it's not nearly as good for archive video as YouTube is. And so those are just some things to think about. But you do have video, you do have this content. Make sure you take the time to share it, to make sure the world sees. Friends, you're probably going to have to invest in some ways, whether it's time, whether it's money, whether it's time and money, whether it's equipment or learning. But the good news is that that is investment that will pay dividends as you are able to share your message with the world, as you are able to connect to people in your community and the broader community who are desperate to hear what you have to say. There are so many people in the world who are thinking and feeling exactly the same things as you are, and they would love to hear from you. They would love to hear some of the hope that you have to share. They would love to feel God's unconditional love through you. So find a way. Take some of those things, whether it's dipping your toe gently into the water or diving right in. Please do so. That is part of what ministry is going to look like forever. The world has changed, and unfortunately, we need to keep up. If you want to dig deeper into that, I would love to have a conversation with you. Reach out to me, pastorgreg18@gmail.com. I would love to talk more about it, to hear about what you're already doing and celebrate with you what you have accomplished on shoestring budgets and with people who had no clue what they were doing. And if you would like some guidance or you just want to commiserate over how technology lets you down, I am your guy. It would be wonderful to share because I have heard so many stories from many different churches who have done creative and wonderful things with people who had no idea what they were doing and very limited technology, and they have creative and beautiful stories about ministry. And I'd love to hear yours as well. So reach out. Reach out to me, reach out to the church down the road, reach out to your friend across the world, and let them know how you as a church are becoming digital, are becoming part of communications technology. I love you all, friends. I'll see you soon. Bye for now.